It's one of Washington's most beloved memorials, marking its 100th year later this month. But how much do we really know about the monument honoring our 16th president? With Faith Salie, we pay a visit.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with a dream. And in the years since, millions have come here to make their own voices heard.
The Lincoln Memorial, more than any other of the monuments memorials we oversee, has become a historic site in its own right, a symbol of where you go to exercise your First Amendment right.
Mike Litterst, chief of communications for the National Mall, says creating a stage for protest wasn't part of the memorial's original design.
It is on a straight line axis from the Capitol to the Washington Monument to where the Lincoln Memorial was built. Henry Bacon, the architect, envisioned that at the far end of the mall you have the Capitol building, which represents the government, and here you have the Lincoln Memorial, Abraham Lincoln, the savior of that government.
Arlington Memorial Bridge is a symbolic link connecting the memorial and the mall to formerly Confederate Virginia. But imagine if the Lincoln Memorial looked like this, or this. Those were just some of the designs that were initially proposed. Ultimately, it was preeminent American architect Henry Bacon's neoclassical design that was selected, modeled after the Parthenon in Athens, all to celebrate a man born in a log cabin. There are 87 steps to the memorial. That's right, 407 steps leading up to Lincoln and engravings of his Gettysburg Address and second inaugural speech. And those with an eagle eye can even spot a typo.
The word future was mistakenly carved with an E to start and had to be sort of puttied or filled in to make the E back into an F.
A charming accident buried in a very deliberate design. The memorial was symbolically hewn from rock that hailed from all parts of the United States, stone from Massachusetts, Colorado, Tennessee, while Lincoln himself is carved of Georgia marble. The design's theme was unity, so there's almost no mention of the actual cause of the Civil War, slavery, according to Scott Sandage, professor of American history at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh.
By saying nothing about slavery, you avoid the rubbing of old sores. So they intentionally build a memorial that has no references in it to enslavement or to the end of slavery, except for the eloquent references that Abraham Lincoln himself made in his second inaugural address.
On May 30th, 1922, the memorial was dedicated by former President Howard Taft in front of a large, segregated crowd, one that included Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln. The only African-American speaker of the day, Dr. Robert Moton, head of the Tuskegee Institute, even had his speech censored. Only the Civil War Union veterans were seated black next to white, as they had fought on the battlefield.
Historically black newspapers like the Chicago Defender began to run editorials that said, the Lincoln Memorial has been opened, but it has not been dedicated, because the memorial itself didn't say anything about slavery.
Perhaps the memorial's true dedication came in 1939, when African-American superstar contralto Marian Anderson performed on its steps, according to Professor Salamisha Tillett of Rutgers, Newark.
I would say when she sang, what people think of as the beginning of the modern civil rights movement. You know, Marian Anderson, Tuscanini famously called her like the voice of the century.
In Washington, 75,000 people.
Anderson had wanted to perform at the Capitol's largest indoor venue, Constitution Hall, but
she was turned down by the Daughters of the American Revolution, who said that only white performers are allowed access there.
Instead, she sang for an integrated crowd of 75,000 and a radio audience of millions. When Anderson began to sing My Country 'Tis of Thee, she changed the words. Instead of singing Of Thee I Sing, she sang To thee we sing.
And she becomes an American voice of democracy in that moment. Perform in front of him was also a way of writing Black people back into the history of Lincoln.
And turning the steps of the memorial into a stage.
Yeah.
If you walk up those steps, I think, it's impossible not to think of Martin Luther King in addition to thinking about Abraham Lincoln, not to think of contralto Marian Anderson. And so in an amazing twist, the Lincoln Memorial became a place for rewriting the history that it was intended to erase. It was intended to forget about racial divides, and it became a place for remembering them and trying to heal them.